Death of a Bureaucrat is a 1966 black comedy directed by Cuban filmmaker Tomás Gutiérrez, also known simply as Aaliyah. Trained in Italy and influenced heavily by Soviet film theory, Aaliyah was a founding member of the Cuban Institute of Film Art and Industry. Notably, he believed that cinema should be both pleasurable and consciousness-raising. In 1988, over 20 years after the release of Death of a Bureaucrat, Aaliyah wrote an 89-page manifesto titled The Viewer's Dialectic. In it, he critiqued capitalist consumer filmmaking for pushing forward the status quo and turning audiences into passive spectators. Aaliyah believes that filmmaking should both engage and activate the viewer, creating consciousness and understanding of deep social, political, and economic conditions. The film we'll be discussing today, Death of a Bureaucrat, was made just 7 years following the Cuban Revolution, which ended in 1959 and left Fidel Castro as head of state. The film shows influence of Eisenstein's dialectical montage, Buñuel's Spanish surrealism, as well as French and American silent comedy. And above all, it serves as a direct critique of bureaucracy, governmental incompetence, and administrative red tape, looking to shine a light on how these issues affect everyday people. As outlined in The Viewer's Dialectic, the film approaches these topics both in terms of entertainment and commentary. The entertainment comes from the film's irreverent Cuban humor, absurdism, aforementioned film references, sight gags, and physical comedy. All of this is then blended with political commentary, with the two intertwining and complementing each other rather than clashing. The story begins with the death of a man named Paco, the uncle of our protagonist. Described as a lifelong proletariat, Tio Paco, upon his death, is buried with his union card as a sign of pride in his work. However, mere minutes later, it's revealed that this card is needed in order to apply for the Tia's pension. Our protagonist then spends the remainder of the film dealing with bureaucracy as he tries to retrieve the card from the grave and then later return his uncle's body after an illegal exhumation. Unfortunately, his path is blocked at every step, leading to crazier and crazier hijinks. The film is structured much like a typical Hollywood film, following a 3-act structure with a linear narrative and clear inciting incident. The inciting incident being the realization that the union card has been buried. Act 1 then ends after the nephew has stolen Paco's body from the graveyard, an action which spurs on the entire rest of the story. Act 2, which I'll note is unusually short for a film of this length, ends with the nephew's lowest moment, locked up in a mental hospital, assumed insane. Finally, the climax of the film, which happens in conjunction with the last scene, sees the nephew murdering the graveyard's undertaker, because, after all that he's been through, the undertaker still will not help him rebury his uncle. Diving farther into the plot of Death of a Bureaucrat, let's begin where the film begins, with the opening credits. Formatted to look like a government report, the credits scroll as triumphant music plays, music which is interrupted every few seconds to the sound of analog film advancing. Not only does this immediately clue the audience in to the type of story we'll be experiencing, a comedic critique of bureaucracy that isn't afraid to poke fun at itself, it also keeps the audience engaged and actively thinking about the viewing experience, something which was, as mentioned, very important to Aaliyah. This theme of comedy being used to remind us we're experiencing a fictional story reoccurs in small ways throughout, like a receptionist speeding up as she explains exhumation laws.
Y sin la asistencia al acto del mismo o de un delegado suyo. No será permitida la exhumación de cadáveres de fallecidos de peste bubónica, cólera asiático, tifus exantemático, difteria, viruela, escarlatina, lepra y muermo, sin que hayan transcurrido 5 años por lo menos de la exhumación y obtener la autorización previa del jefe local de sanidad. Quedan exceptuados todos aquellos casos para los que se haya obtenido autorización especial de la Dirección de Sanidad.
A crowd literally freezing at the whistle of authority. A banana peel appearing out of nowhere on the high-up ledge of a building. This movie is packed wall-to-wall with reminders that this is a story being told through the medium of film. It's not a passive viewing experience, and though the aesthetics and cinematography are beautifully crafted and composed, the style doesn't serve to pull us in, but rather to keep us out in the real world, thinking. Speaking of thinking, let's talk a bit more about bureaucracy, which, as the title Death of a Bureaucrat would suggest, is the main point of the film. A scene which for me most encapsulates bureaucratic frustration comes at 41 minutes in, the film's midpoint. In this scene, the nephew goes to a government building to get an order for the exhumation of his uncle. He then spends the next 7 minutes getting bounced around from desk to desk. Go to desk 12, go to desk 20, go to desk 46. Eventually, he ends up right back where he started, having accomplished nothing. No one cares about his problems, no one wants to help, they just don't want to be dealing with him. And that's bureaucracy. While Aaliyah was an outspoken supporter of Prime Minister Fidel Castro, he was also clearly not afraid to critique the elements of the regime he found problematic. And not only here, these critiques are littered throughout, with several entire scenes dedicated to poking fun at communist propaganda.
Más fuerza en ese bíceps. ¿Acaso no ha estudiado anatomía? ¿Y esto qué es?
El pulpo.
¿Y se puede saber qué es lo que hace aquí un pulpo?
Es el que usted pidió para caracterizar el imperialismo.
Un poco pequeño el imperialismo, ¿no le parece?
Overall, Death of a Bureaucrat is a well-planned and executed political satire, with continued relevance in the modern age. Though this film came out over 50 years ago, bureaucracy has gone nowhere, and while the specific situation of a lost union card may not be relatable to modern viewers, most audiences know what it's like to be stuck in the DMV for hours, or on hold with your bank, indefinitely waiting for a representative. Death of a Bureaucrat is approachable, funny, engaging, held together by solid critique. It's everything Aaliyah wanted it to be. For those looking to dip their toes into the world of Cuban comedy, satire, or film in general, this is a must-watch. Thank you for listening.